Alrighty, so welcome. I am really excited to show you all so many great brainstorming techniques and really show you the way to do it to come up with the most creative names that you could possibly ever come up with. And I'm going to really open your mind up and show you a lot of new creative ways to think about brainstorming. And I'm going to shatter some beliefs. So let's get started. By the way, purple's one of my favorite colors. I'm sitting at my purple Easter egg shaped desk. And one of the things I believe about brainstorming is if you surround yourself with color, it can really help you come up with colorful ideas. Okay, so my name is Alexandra Watkins. I am the Chief Executive Boss Lady of Eat My Words. We have been around for 15 years, naming all kinds of companies, products, lots and lots of startups. I was in the Bay Area for 22 years, so I'm very familiar with the Bay Area. Now I'm down in San Diego. I work out of my pool house in my Barbie dream house, and there's so much, it's just a lot of fun to be here. So what else do you need to know? Oh, I wrote, yeah, hello, my name is Awesome. How to create brand names that stick. That's right here, second edition. And I am going to show you a lot of things that aren't in my book. So let's get started. Okay, first we're going to talk about the creative brief. And the creative brief is what you need to brainstorm. A lot of people just start brainstorming, but it's so much better if you have a document and a strategy so you know exactly what you need to be focused on for your name and you don't get off track. I'm going to tell you how to prepare to brainstorming. There's actually something you can do besides ordering a pizza. I will show you some of my favorite ways to get ideas for coming up with names. So I'm going to give you a lot of new tools for that. I'm going to show you how to choose the right name. A lot of people don't have any guidelines for this. And I'm going to give you a lot of objective criteria that you use so you end with the right name, not the name that's met with the least resistance. And finally, we will have an Ask Me Anything Q&A. I encourage you to ask me a lot of questions. I love questions. Yesterday, for those of you who were in the domain name webinar, there was so many questions, and I really welcome them. And I like when people challenge me too. So have at it. So let's go into the creative brief. Like I said, it's your brand name roadmap. It's something that you want all of the decision makers in your company to be involved with, so everyone is on the same page. And like I said, it is essential for brainstorming. It keeps you focused and on strategy. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an example of some of the things in a creative brief. I don't have time today to go through everything in the brief, but I'll show you enough to give you a taste. And we're going to do it for an actual client that I had, which was a frozen yogurt franchise. So the goal of the assignment, that's important to know, and this was to develop a memorable brand name, Zenyo, a trendy new chain of frozen yogurt stores in Utah. Zenyo was their working name, and they came to us and they said, well, you're called Eat My Words, you probably know a thing about food, and we want to do diligence and see if there's a better name out there than Zenyo. And we said, yes, there is, and we will find it for you. All right, brand positioning. So this is, how do you want your brand to be positioned in the marketplace, and what differentiates you from your competitors? That's really important to know, because if there's something that you can communicate your name about that, it will really help you attract the type of customers that you want to attract. So in this instance, Zenyo is the modern place to enjoy a cold and refreshing skinny treat of healthy frozen yogurt. And at the time, there was no frozen yogurt in Utah. This was a first. It was a while ago, but still one of my favorite projects ever. Target audience. All right, who's your primary target? In this case, teenagers. And also, who's your secondary target? In this case, adults and families. Now, a lot of times when I'm working with startups, their secondary target is investors. And yes, it is important that you want to attract investors and you want them to like your name, but ultimately you want your name to appeal to your target audience first. All righty. Next, desired brand experiences. this is something a lot of people don't think about, and it's worth investing some time to really think about. How do you want your customers to feel when they experience your name or brand? So how do you want them to feel if they see it, in social media, on a t-shirt, in this case, on a store sign? Or somebody's talking about it, or somebody's tweeting it? How do you want them to feel when they see your name? In this case, and ultimately you want them to smile. In this case, yeah, this name totally makes me smile. And I think it helps if you put these in quotation marks and think of a customer actually seeing these things. It sounds like a fun place. OMG, I've got to get the t-shirt. And that's something we strive for with all of our names, especially for retail. We want to, and think about this, what can you put your name on merch that somebody would want to pay for and wear? Next, I am so taking my friends here. And finally, just one word brand experience, yum. So sometimes a brand experience is just one word. All right, now you want to think about your brand personality adjectives. And I think it's important that you have 7 adjectives maybe that you come up with to describe what is the personality of your brand. And I love this image of this young woman because I think if you can think of your brand as a person, it really helps. And I'll just tell you now, don't say trusted, right? Because trusted, it's hard to say trust in your name. Like, would you buy a used car from Trusty Sid's? Probably not. So stay away from really common things and try to go to what you really want people to feel. Again, going back to it being like a person and a personality. Happy and friendly, fun and playful, modern and fresh, and a little edgy. So our client was in Utah, which can be very conservative, but they still wanted to push the envelope and kind of make a statement. So then this is really important. Write an acid test, what is your acid test sentence? So write your name, or write how your name would be used in a sentence. And you might want to do a couple different sentences. How would users use it? How would employees use it? Think about all of those things. How would the press use it in a sentence? So here, name is the cool new hangout for teens where they can enjoy tasty frozen yogurt in a modern setting. Now, that's probably a run-on sentence, and everybody's acid test sentence ends up being one. But when you're reviewing names later, it's going to help if you can run all of your names through your acid test. And your acid test might change over time, and that's okay. But when you're starting out writing your creative brief, it's really valuable to do this. Something also really valuable is, what are your domain name modifiers? If you can't secure an exact match domain name, that's okay. And if you were in the webinar yesterday on domain names, you learned all kinds of ways to work around that. So, it's perfectly fine not to have an exact match. If you weren't there, I'll tell you right now, go to namestudio.com. That can really help you ideate domain name ideas. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, and how it can help you ideate brand name ideas as well. But don't get stuck on a domain name. Come up with some modifiers in advance. And that's something to think about, because you don't want to start with your domain name when you're coming up with brand names. Start with your brand name. Worry about the domain name later. So in this case, it could be name froyo, enjoy name, yo name, which is kind of fun, hello name. Those are just some of the ones I came up with. And like I said, if you go to Name Studio, you'll find a lot more. There's so many different modifier words there. So it's really important that you do this before you start, so then you can step away in the beginning from finding a domain name and concentrate on finding a great name. So now let's talk about prepping for brainstorming. It's really important that you have all of your tools that you need to brainstorm before you dive into it. The most important thing you can do is have your creative brief handy, because you're going to want it to check against. And another reason why you need it is you're going to pull some starter words out of it. And what starter words are, they're just words in your brief that you can use to concept and find ideas. And you'll see how we do that a little later on. But in this case, and this is why in your brief, you want to have as much information as possible because it gives you a lot of opportunity to find starter words. And I like to start out with just a dozen. So in this case, I went through the brief and the 12 starter words I pulled out. So a word like tasty, I wouldn't have in the name necessarily, but that's a concept that I can explore. Same with Zen. Zen was in their original name, Zen and Yo. So those are words I can explore, but not necessarily use. But cool might be a word that I use. Cold could be a word that I use. So don't get so locked in. And if you can't find 12 words, that's okay. You'll come up with more along the way. Now, another thing you want to do is have a system for organizing your names. In this case, what I've done, and everyone's a little different, but what I've found works for me is to have 3 different buckets. The first is spot on. Those are names that feel great to me. The second are maybe names. They could possibly work. So I'm going to color code these when we do our exercise. Those are orange, then I'll circle them in. I don't think we have many of those. And then sparks are words to explore further. And those are kind of like starter words, right? You can take them and set them aside for later, or you can just go down that rabbit hole. It happens all the time. So if you have those buckets and you're super organized, you're not going to discount any like maybe ideas, because the worst thing is when you're like, oh, what was that one name I had? And you can't remember it, write everything down. Next, you need time. Brainstorming takes time. I'm going to show you just a handful of the exercises I do when I'm brainstorming, and there's so many more. So you want to really allow yourself plenty of time. Like we can spend 3 weeks coming up with name ideas. So don't rush into it. When you think about your name is going to last longer than any other investment you make in your business. It's going to last longer than how many iPhones have you had, for instance? It's going to last longer than your latest iPhone. It's going to last longer than your favorite employee. It's going to last longer than any piece of office equipment you buy. So imagine how long your name is going to last and how often it will get used. Your name will get used more than any other investment you make in your business. So really think about that. Next, you want to have a childlike imagination. I told you in the beginning that I like to surround myself with color. I think it's really helpful if you don't have toys around you. And I don't necessarily mean kids' toys. I mean, a magic 8-ball. Well, I guess that's a kid's toy, but you can have fun with it. Just, I have a surfboard in my office and a skateboard and a stuffed animal a sofa made of stuffed animals. I have a thing of scissors. It's like on a Lazy Susan, it turns around and there's like 18 pairs of scissors in there, and they're all different colors, and I never really use them, but they just are fun to look at. I have a little gnome table and I named them nomenclature. So just surround yourself with things that are fun and creative, and it will help you get that childlike imagination, because we know that kids are fearless and you want to be fearless in your brainstorming. Next, let's talk about brainstorming tools. For, as long as, people have been brainstorming, they have been sitting in a white room, staring at a whiteboard, right? We gather around the conference room table and we're expected to just come up with ideas off the top of our head. That's not a good idea. And I'm going to show you some other tools. So this is wrong. Sitting in a white room, staring at a whiteboard is not how colorful ideas materialize. And if you've ever brainstormed in a conference room, you know what happens. The extroverts take over, right? Someone like me, a big extrovert, right? So I'm like talking loudly, I'm like championing my ideas. While if you're an introvert, maybe you're not speaking up, maybe you're afraid to say what your idea is because you don't want it shut down. Maybe you are going to ask your boss for a raise the next day. And so you don't want to poo-poo the boss's idea or even suggest an idea on your own because you want to hold back in case, people think your idea is bad. You don't want to be seen as not adding value to the company. So don't do it this way. There are far better brainstorming tools. Ouija board, a bottle of wine, and playing drunken Scrabble are not those tools. So Sorry if I disappointed you. Yeah, drunken Scrabble is not really ever a good idea. And by the way, if you ever want to see a funny video, Google Vooza, Vooza, drunken Scrabble, and you'll see a funny video for Vooza, a company that we didn't name, and they do a lot of spoofs of startup culture, and all of the Vooza videos are hilarious. All right, this is the only brainstorming tool you need. Everything you need to brainstorm is right in front of you on your computer. It is a brainstorming machine. And the even better news is the number of participants you need in your brainstorming meeting is one, you. You can do this all by yourself. So your ideas aren't getting shot down. You're not getting cluttered with what other people are saying. You're just going at it on your own, and I'm going to show you how. All right, so now we're going to talk about how to get big ideas, and we're going to go back to our list of starter words. So you're going to choose a word from your list for concepting. So today we're going to choose the word cold. All right, cold, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to a thesaurus. I like thesaurus.com, but there's many online. Power Thesaurus is another one. We're going to look up the word cold. Now, wait, I'm going to go back for a second. If you're sitting in the white room with 12 people around the table and you are concepting around the word cold, you will come up with some ideas, but I guarantee you, you're not going to come up with as many ideas as a thesaurus. And that's why it's so important that you use your computer. There's so many sources online where people have already done this for you. So here we see the word cold, and I'm going to highlight some words that I think could lead to a good name. And then on the next slide, we're going to talk about each of those individually. Say Arctic, bitter, chill, goosebumps, nippy, polar, shivery, snowy, and wintry. So let's talk about each of those. First, Arctic. Arctic isn't a good word on its own, but it's something I can put on my list as a spark to explore later. And I do when I come up with Arctic Circle, which is, it's okay, but I put it on the list. Bitter, I love. I think it's really fun because the frozen yogurt store is only going to have two flavors, tart, which is bitter, and green tea. So that could be interesting. Plus there's that kind of like, the teens in Utah could be bitter because many of them have to live a pretty conservative lifestyle. And by the way, I love Utah. I have lots of, this assignment actually ended up, a woman worked at this client eventually as an intern. She started working for me later, and she has brought me so many great people that live in Utah who now work for Eat My Words as namers. Chill's okay. That's a maybe. It's kind of dated even for Utah. Goosebumps, I love, because this is all about teens socializing and, teen love and goosebumps. Like, I think it's really fun. Never in a million years would I have come up with that name on my own. And certainly I don't think it's something people would come up with in a conference room. Nippy is kind of fun. I like it. I'll just tell you later on, I look it up in the Urban Dictionary and I cross it off the list later. So if you are doing anything targeted at teens, I highly recommend that you go through the Urban Dictionary. As painful as it can be, it can save you a lot of even further pain later. Polar, that's a spark. And what I like about polar, though, is these two flavors are kind of polarizing, right? Tart and green tea. So I make polarize a word. Okay, that's kind of a maybe still. Shiver on its own is kind of cool. I like that. Snowy, there's really nothing there, but it's going to lead to something later. And wintry makes me think of winter sports. That could be a good theme to explore. And if you went to webinar 1 and you learned the SMILE acronym, you learned all about themes, and winter could be a theme. Okay, next what I'm gonna do, and this is really easy for you, search for images. A picture says 1,000 words. So what I like to do is search for images, look at pictures, and that sparks creative ideas. So there's a couple places you can do this, stock photo libraries. I like Shutterstock and Adobe Stock. Pretty much every photo you'll see in my presentation that's a stock photo came from Adobe Stock. Google Images is a really fun place to look for images. It's not as well curated, but sometimes you can see some crazy stuff. And of course, Pinterest and Instagram, although I will warn you, both of those places you can get sucked into and get distracted. And the next thing you know, you're looking up a quiche recipe. So I would say one of the stock photo houses or Google Images is the way to go. So we're gonna go through Google Images for this. And I'm gonna do an image search for cold weather. I have always lived on the West Coast. I'm not that familiar with cold weather. And so I look it up. I see lots of snow, and yes, that is a naked man sitting in the snow, and that's what makes Google Images a little fun. So that makes me think of a name though, and the name I think of is Frostbite, and I think that would be a really fun name. So I put that on the list. That's definitely a yes. And I see all these thermometers, and I'm like, what's there? You know, I feel like something's there, and I'm thinking, okay, there's like, you know, freezing, like below 32 degrees. And I'm like, oh, this yogurt is a skinny treat. And I look up how many calories are in frozen yogurt. And in the non-fat kind, it's below 30 calories. So I put 30 below as a name. Like, that's a creative name. And it's really different than most frozen yogurt stores that are, a lot of them are, if you went to the webinar 2, Scratch, you saw copycat names, you saw all of the Pinkberry knockoffs that are a color and a fruit. Well, this isn't, neither of these are color and fruits. They're really creative. So 30 below, that's a maybe. Okay, now I'm gonna search for winter sports, and that was inspired by wintry and snow, the words I found in the thesaurus. So I Google winter sports, and I see this guy doing an aerial trick on his snowboard, and I think, wow, that is so cool. I'm like, so cool could make a good name for a frozen yogurt store. I dismiss it later when I'm going through the creative brief and I'm looking at my desired brand experiences, and I see I want to wear the t-shirt, and I'm thinking, no one wants to wear a t-shirt that says so cool. It's like obnoxious, right? So later that will get knocked off the list, but for now I'm gonna leave it on there. And also the word cool, I explore it later. It leads to cool it, which I think is really fun. So this is where you're just gotta really just keep diving in, keep going, keep going. And here I'm just showing you, we're searching for a couple different words, but keep coming back to these places to look for more. Now I'm going to try a different word from the starter words, and I'm going to put in enjoy froyo, right? So this is a phrase, and I immediately see these spoons, and that's makes me think of Spoon Me, and I love the name Spoon Me, so that goes on the list. And I would never have thought of that on my own, but looking at pictures is what gave me that idea. All right, next, I'm going to show you another way that you can explore words and phrases using namestudio.com, which I've already mentioned. So namestudio.com was developed by Verisign. It's a really easy to use domain name generator, but what I love about it, and by the way, I showed everybody that yesterday, and I encourage you to, when the webinar is packaged and available to you, and you can see all of them at once, go back and watch webinar 3 on domain names, because you're going to see a lot of other cool ways to use Name Studio. But for brand names, it's really helpful, and it gives me a lot of ideas that I wouldn't normally think of. So it's not just for domain names. So it's a great way to discover ideas, and what it does is it dynamically generates relevant domain name options that can complement any keywords you type in, whether it's of an interest or just a word. Just keep trying different things, and here's how. And what's cool about it is, you know, I showed you a thesaurus. Name Studio is kind of like a thesaurus, but better, because it pulls from all these different sources to dynamically generate all of these ideas. So let's take a look how it works. So I'm at namestudio.com, and I type in eatfrozennYogurt.com. And then I type then I click on Brainstorming, which is one of the 2 tabs you can click on. And right away, it presents me with all of these different ideas. And what Name Studio does, it's really cool. I don't know how, but it knows how to break your search terms apart. So you can see it's broken eat, frozen, and yogurt into 3 different columns. So what you'll see is on the left, there's prefixes. So if I was looking for a domain name, I could see prefixes. There's also suffixes, and those are great for domain names. But in this case, we're just looking for brand names. And right away, I see a name I love, Swirl. Swirl makes a really fun frozen yogurt name, and all of us that have eaten frozen yogurt have seen, you know, it's swirled around, right? So that's a really cool, fun name that I wouldn't come up with on my own or in a conference room. And then I see another name I love, Twisted. That's so cool. It's like swirl, but a little edgier, and we know the client likes edgy. Now, how in the heck Name Studio came up with swirl under eat? I don't know. And you know what? It doesn't even matter. I just love that it's there. Same with frozen. How did Twisted get under frozen? I don't know. It's kind of like when you do Name Studio, the reason I love it, it's like you go to Vegas and you're doing a slot machine and you like pull the arm and then like, boom, here's all these ideas, and you never know what you're gonna get, but there's always ideas there. So I highly encourage you to use it for brainstorming. It's one of my very best secrets. Alrighty, next, we're gonna go what I call Google storming, and that's a word that I made up. And Google storming is just asking Google questions, typing in phrases to get content to look through. Now, the reason I like content is I'm always skimming. I'm looking for words, whole words, like you saw with where we just were, and you saw Twisted and Swirl. Those are whole words. I'm a big believer in whole word names, unexpected ones that aren't already in use, as opposed to coining words, which is much harder to do. And I can do it. I just actually created a new online course, and I have 2 lessons in there on how to invent names. But I think the best names are the ones that are whole words because they're more familiar to people. So Google storming, I'm just gonna type in some phrases to Google. How to dress in cold weather. That can give me words and pictures. Things people do to stay warm, something I'm unfamiliar with, and coldest places on earth. So these are all places I'm gonna look for ideas. So I'm gonna pick this one for today, coldest places on earth. And I'm going to get here and read and I'm gonna just scan, right? I'm looking for name ideas. So most of these are words I can't even pronounce, but I do see a name that I love, Antarctica. I think that would make a really fun name for a frozen yogurt store. You know, I can just imagine a kid saying, hey mom, I'm going to Antarctica. I'll be home in time for dinner. So that's what I mean by an acid test as well. Think about like how somebody might use it in a conversation. And so if you can go that deep, you can really wrap your head around, is this the right name or not? So I love Antarctica. I think it's really fun. And then I go, I'm gonna research one of these places. I just start clicking on all of these to read about them because I think I could come up with some interesting words. So now I read about a place I can't pronounce, apologies to anyone who speaks Russian. So I'm just gonna read this, and I'm not gonna read it out loud to you, but I'm skimming, right? I'm always skimming, looking for an interesting word that pops out at me. And right away, I see frigid. And I think frigid would make an awesome name for a frozen yogurt store. It's so unexpected. It's really fun and playful. They could have a t-shirt that said, you know, not tonight, dear, I have a frozen yogurt headache. And frigid kind of, you know, it plays into that, you know, kind of, it's a little self-deprecating, and the client was fine with self-deprecating about Utah being really conservative. So that could be fun. And then I skim some more and I see Siberian. Siberian isn't a great name on its own, but Siberia would make such a fun name. It's even better than Antarctica. It's shorter, it has more, it's more recognized, and it's known, like when you say Siberia, it's known as being like, you know, it's far away. I've flown over frozen Siberia a couple times. It's far. When you think of Utah, they're really culturally distant from a lot of the US, the rest of the US. So Utah kind of is like Siberia in a way. So I think that could be really fun. So I add that to the list. Now I'm going to Google songs about cold. And it's just amazing what you can find on the internet. The website ranker.com is a great place to go, by the way, to look up song titles and also just look up anything, movies, any, you know, movies about movies with the word hot. You could do movies about jazz, like whatever you do, it's just going to give you more and more ideas, more places to look for words. So I look at songs about cold. I'm looking at these, you know, there's songs maybe I like, you know, some of these are totally off, but I see Cold Hearted, and I think that that could be really, really fun for a name. I later learned in trademark screening that Cold Stone Creamery is very litigious against any frozen confection company that uses cold as the first word in their name. And my client could win because nobody would confuse the name Cold Hearted, I know, with Cold Stone Creamery. They're very different. But my client doesn't want, I know, to spend the money and the time to fight a big company like Cold Stone Creamery. And that's why it's so important to do your trademark research and really get a feel for, is this something that, is this a name we could trademark? And, you know, what are we up against? Okay, next I'm going to do, this is something most people would never think to do. I'm going to search for a word I made up, slanguage, which is slang, because you never know what you're going to find. So slang is also known as jargon or lingo. So what I do is I look up jargon and lingo related to some of the concepts I'm searching for. Also, glossaries of terms are great places to find names, as long as they don't have what I call the curse of knowledge. And if you went to webinar 2, you know that's the C in Scratch, the second C in Scratch, curse of knowledge. So you don't want a term that only engineers know, for instance. You want something that your target audience would be familiar with. And dictionaries of terms is another phrase you could search for. So I am going to Google, because I'm unfamiliar with it, snowboarding lingo. So there's tons, this page is a mile long, but these are the ones I see right away. And I see Shred the Gnar 101, and that sounds super fun. I don't even know what Shred the Gnar is. I later learned that that's a phrase for snowboarding. So I'm gonna go to that website, and the website is very long, like dictionary of terms, and I'm just gonna pull out 3 here to show you. I'm Shred the Gnar. Yard sale is a fall where someone's equipment falls off. I thought that was hilarious. And that's why I like brainstorming online. Like, I learned these crazy things. And so a lot of people dread brainstorming, and I want to tell you, it can be really, really fun. So think about it like that. Like, you're going on an adventure. Think about brainstorming online like a treasure hunt. You're just digging for ideas. Okay, taco is a fall where your body folds over a rail, creating a taco shape. Okay, that's hilarious. Neither of those would make great names for a froyo store. And chatter. Okay, I like that word. Chatter means when the board shakes because of rough terrain. It's an innocuous term, right? But what I love about it for a name is the kids are chattering and socializing. Teeth are chattering. You know, Utah can be a very cold place in winter. The flagship store is in Salt Lake City, a big place where people go as their base for skiing. And it's just fun. Like, if you're a snowboarder, it's that kind of wink, wink, haha, it's a snowboarding term, but it doesn't matter if you know it or not. It's kind of a nice to know, but it doesn't matter. So I put chatter on the list. I love that name. It has a lot of different meanings to it. And that's what I'm always looking for in a word. Does it have many meanings to it? The more layered your name is, the deeper it is, the better. All right. Now let's talk about choosing the right name. How do you do that? Most people don't have any criteria. Well, first I'm going to show you what not to do. Do not ask for everyone's opinion. They are not experts on naming. If you've taken this webinar, you know more than they do. If you've read my book, you know even more. If you've done my online class, you're almost an expert. So don't ask for everybody's opinion. When you ask, what do you think of this name? That's not what they hear. What they hear is, what don't you like about this name? And it's an invitation to criticize. So as tempting as it is to ask, don't ask. Don't conduct focus groups, same thing. And don't send surveys. Can you imagine if Richard Branson had sent a survey monkey to his mates asking what they thought of the name Virgin? It never would have flown. Sorry, cheesy Alexandra humor. And also, don't consult your magic 8-ball. Definitely keep one on your desk for brainstorming just to have fun. But yeah, that's not a good way to test it. The question to ask yourself: most people ask, "Do I like it?" That question is subjective. It's not the right question to ask. The right question to ask is it right for the brand? It's way more objective, and it puts you in the shoes of the customer, not just your personal bias. And have everybody on your team ask the same question. Now, how do you objectively evaluate the names? That was one way, asking the right question. At this point, I'm going to show you, this is a bunch of names that I came up with during this exercise. Some you saw how I came up with, others you didn't see because we only have an hour today, and I don't have time to show you every single way that I used to come up with these, but you can see, like when we explored yo, I used a rhyming dictionary. I found the word chateau, and I thought chateau yo would be really fun. So I told you Urban Dictionary is one way to evaluate the names. Let's look at some other ones. I've mentioned smile as the 5 qualities that make a name great. Scratch is when to scratch it off the list. It's my smile and scratch test. It is a 12-point name evaluation filter to help you evaluate names. So these are all of the things that it stands for: suggestive, memorable, imagery, legs, and emotional. I encourage you to go back and do the first webinar so you can learn more about these. And then scratch is when to scratch it off the list, because it makes people scratch their head, and it has any of these challenges, not just one. If it has any of these challenges, trust me, your name is going to be problematic. So find a better name. You want to revisit your creative brief. Why? You want to see it with fresh eyes. You want to review the goals and assignment. You need to eliminate any names that are off strategy. That's really important. And when you have that many names, it's good to have a filter so you can just keep getting rid of them and get to the very best names. You want to do trademark screening. First thing, do online knockout searches. I recommend using a professional trademark screener to get screens done of your names by a human rather than just doing them online. The one I recommend, if you email me, alexandra@eatmywords.com, I'll give you the name of my screener. You really want to use a trademark attorney when you get down to the finalist. Next, what you want to do, and this might seem counterintuitive, like I said, don't start with your domain name. You already have your list of modifier words from your creative brief. And at this point, you can come up with some more. So these are the modifier words I have, but you'll come up with more along the way. Then I'm just going to skip ahead and show you, there's so many different ways to eliminate names. I showed you the very best ones. So the brightest name, the one that shined above all the rest, the one that passed every single test that I have cleared trademarking, is Spoon Me. So Spoon Me was so much fun. Here's how the client extended the brand, and this is what I mean by legs. When a store was opening, instead of coming soon, it said spooning soon. The store signs, the hours said spooning hours, no spooning on Sundays, and no shirt, no shoes, no spoon. So before you've even entered the store or experienced tasting the yogurt, you already love this brand. That's what a great name can do. An awesome name can create instant brand affinity. And like I said, you can create merchandise. And this is some of the Spoon Me merchandise. Now, if you can get somebody to pay you to wear your name on a t-shirt or you know, shorts or, you know, bumper sticker, anything, they're paying you to advertise your brand. If you can do that, you are golden. So the bottom line is it pays to have a love at first sight brand name. So the takeaways are, it's essential to work off of a creative brief. Brainstorm solo instead of in groups, mine the online gold mine, and use all of those objective filters instead of opinions. So that's the bottom line. I want to encourage you to attend tomorrow's webinar about name changes. Even if you're not considering changing your name, you're going to see some fantastic and super inspiring before and after makeovers that will really make you realize, especially if you're kind of on the fence, like how much better your name might be able to be. You're going to see how to roll out a name change if you're curious about that. And maybe you don't need to change your name, but you know another startup founder that might need to change their name. It could be good for you to have this knowledge and share it with them. And then when all of these webinars are done and released, which will be shortly, go back and do the first one. That's really the foundation, and that's where Smile is. Do Scratch, and then for sure do yesterday's on domain names. There's so much information in those. Okay, now it's time to ask me anything.
All right, well, thank you again for an amazing webinar. So our first question comes from Sandy. Do you like partial words put together like froyo, or do you prefer whole words?
I prefer whole words. I think there's a way to do, so Zenyo, like Zenyo, right? I think with something like that, it's forced. It kind of tries too hard. Like, get it? Zen yogurt, where a name like rollerblade is two words put together, but it sounds natural. So if something sounds natural, like MasterCard, two words put together. So think about it that way. If it sounds natural when you say it, GoPro, right? Fitbit. That's my acid test, but it sounds forced together. Like there's one, anything like with the word seed or fresh or hello, those start to feel really forced. So I would say, think about, does it sound like a real word? And that's just a good acid test for any name. Does it, like if you're coining a word, like a word like Optima sounds like a real word, or Pentium, but something like Screencastify, that's three words forced together. It doesn't feel natural.
Okay, great answer. So we have brainstorming can extend forever. How do we decide when to stop and finalize a name?
That's a really, really good question. So I just keep going until I feel like every stone has been unturned. And for me, it's just going through all my starter words and going through all of the different places I look. And like I said, I mean, there's so many more than this. You know, you'll learn more in my book or in my course. I do everything I possibly can, and then I feel like I'm done. But it can take a couple weeks.
Hmm. So how long does the process usually take once a client hires you to when you actually have the name and the trademark and everything?
Um, usually,
I know everyone's a little
usually
different, but average.
average is I would say 6 weeks, maybe a little longer if they need a tagline. But we do, you know, we've also done things overnight. And I have, you know, if you take my course, you get a free hour of time with me. And oftentimes, like the other day, I did it with one of my students, and I came up with her name on the call. And that's not unusual for that to happen. So sometimes I'm like, you know, an idiot savant, and I can just spit them out. And because in 15 years, I've named a lot of things, and I'll just like go back in my brain's dusty filing cabinet and pull out an idea, or I'll just come up with something. I remember I was on something like this, and someone said they needed a name for their vehicle wrap company, and I came up with Scenic Drive. Like it just came out. So sometimes I just do that.
Okay. Next question is, how do you price such name finding projects? How much work is it a week or more? I mean, what can be charged to the client, and how can the best startups get help? Wait, how can we best startups to help them get started? Any recommendations?
Okay, that was a lot of questions. Can you ask one at a time?
So how do you price such name finding projects first?
Okay, so our fees, our prices start at 15,000. We go all the way up to 60,000. It just depends. That would be for like a big corporate naming project. What I recommend people do is spend $999. Take my online course. You're going to get a ton of information. Lots of brainstorming. You're going to get an hour of my time, or you don't get an hour. Actually, if you're on this call, if you see this webinar, just tell me I said an hour. I'll give you an hour of my time. It's really only half an hour. And then you get to go to these group calls, and so you get more of my time. So that's probably the most cost-effective way for people to do things. But a lot of startups come to us, especially startups that have been funded or they've realized their name isn't working for them, or they pivoted and they've outgrown their name. And if you come tomorrow, you'll see how we've done some of those name changes. So sometimes startups, sometimes they're a couple of years in and they're like, all right, now we're ready to grow up and we need a real name. That happens all the time. So then they're going to do, that's sometimes a $25,000 project.
All right, well, that answered all the questions from him.
Okay.
Someone, Ken said, I feel so empowered with the process you outlined for finding names on your own. But how do you know if you have, how do you test the reaction of non-biased consumers before you move forward? So he might be really in love with the name, but because he's so invested in it, but how will he know how others react?
We don't test. Like, look, if it passes the smile and scratch test and it meets the goals of your breed, that's I mean, like, I just know, right? Like with Spoon Me, I just knew. I knew as soon as I saw that name, that was the name. And our clients thought so too. So a lot of times I will just know, but the you if you really need to test it, I think a good test is to say it to someone and see how they react. And you want them to, for me, it's always like, do they smile? And when I mean smile, I don't mean laugh. I mean, they get it, right? Like Spoon Me, that's it. I get it. We named a GPS for dogs Retriever. And when people hear it, it takes a second and they get it. Oh, like a dog retriever. I get it, a GPS. And they smile. So for me, that's always the making that emotional connection. Does your name do that?
I think Retriever is my favorite name that I've heard so far.
Oh, thank you.
Moving forward, how do you do a final check on a name's availability and it's not protected with some type of IP?
Okay. Well, the first thing you can do is start out doing Google searches to see if your name is in use. Just Google it. If you're, Spoon Me frozen yogurt, is anybody using it? So that's one way to just knock out competitors. There's online trademark searching places. There's one if you take my course, you get 60 days of free online trademark screening at one of my partners. You can hire a professional trademark screener, which is what I do. His screens are they're like $30, $35 each, depending if you need international. So that's something to do. You can go to uspto.gov. I don't personally find using a government website that easy, but a lot of people do. And so that's what I do. There's no IP in a trademark. A trademark is about doing trade. And so is your business being used to sell something? And it is really important. And I should tell you this, I said it yesterday, just because you own the domain name does not mean you own the trademark. We had a guy call us one time. He spent $45,000 on an aftermarket domain name and then learned he couldn't trademark the name. And he couldn't sell it to anybody because nobody could trademark it. So don't make that mistake. Like, really do your research.
Oh, wow. Is the decision making based on storytelling of the name rather than the semantics?
No. Here's why. Because you're not going to be there to tell a story. You're not going to be there for somebody to pick up your, box of cereal or whatever it is, Faye frozen yogurt, Fage. They have to explain the pronunciation on the back of the yogurt container, which has about this much real estate, the back of your yogurt container should be used to talk about how delicious your yogurt is or whatever your brand differentiators are, not how to pronounce the name. So I don't think your name needs to tell a story. You know, it's great if it can, I think your name should be suggestive of a positive brand experience, but it's hard for a name to tell the whole story. Tomorrow when you see the name changes, you'll see a name that has a story behind it, but you don't need to know the story to appreciate the name.
Okay, and last question. This kind of has to do with brainstorming, but somebody DM, because of COVID, it's been getting harder and harder to collaborate with my team. Even during our Zoom calls, it feels like pulling teeth. What would you recommend for our team to get energized and excited again about collaborating and brainstorming?
That's a great question. I've wondered, how are people brainstorming during the age of COVID with Zoom? So here's what I recommend, and I recommend this in person or over Zoom. So everybody go on your own and do all the online exercises. Do all of them. Like really, because you'll all come up with, and you know what? You'll come up with different starter words. Even if you have the same starter words, you'll come up with more. You'll go in different paths. Everybody's going to Google storm different terms. So it's not like you're all going to do the same thing, right? Then do some filtering where you're, do they pass all the different, smile and scratch tests, urban dictionary, whatever it is you need to run your name through, is it right for the brand test? Then meet as a team and say, okay, these are my, 10 favorite names and why. So you champion your own names. You have the floor, and this is really important. Tell people they can't make any negative comments. They can only focus on the positive, because positive comments are what's going to get you to the final solution, to the name that's right for the brand. But if people just right off the bat are giving their opinion, I don't like that, oh, it reminds me of my ex-girlfriend's dog was named that, whatever they say, you don't want to go there. So, people, when I present names to a client, that's my rule. And by the way, in my book, there's guidelines for groups that tells you how to evaluate names as a group. And some of it you learned here, like have your creative brief handy, have the smile and scratch test handy. But when you are allowed to say what it is that you think is right about a name, what happens is other people hear you and they say, yeah, that name works for me too. I like it. So then you're going to start building consensus. So building consensus is really important, but you get to say your names first, then somebody else goes with their name. And hopefully by the end of that meeting, everybody's had a chance to present their names and talk about them. Everyone stayed positive. The negative is you're allowed to say like, oh, that's the name of a competitor. You're allowed to say that. That's okay. But everything else, it's not going to help. Just have people say what it is that is right about it. By the end of that Zoom meeting, you will have a list that you can then, you don't have to do trademark screening yet. Wait until you have your list and then send it through trademark screening.
Oh, nice. Well, that's all the questions for today. Thank you so much for our fourth webinar. Make sure everyone RCPs for the final webinar on Thursday. She'll be going over makeovers, which has been highly requested in the chat. So thank you again, Alexandra, and you can find all the recordings on YouTube before December 1st after the webinar series has ended.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow.
For Thursday.
Oh, sorry, Thursday. Sorry. Oh my gosh.
Thursday.
Yay. Okay, a day where I can be casual again. Okay, I'll see you Thursday.
All right. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.